Hi, this is Mayor David Henderson from the City of Brockville, City View on BNTV. And we haven't been on TV for a little while. It's been almost since summer, so we've got a few things to catch up on. And actually a few big things to catch up on. Probably the first big thing is this is the first actual shot, or the second actual shot, of my new hair look. I was off for a little operation up in Ottawa, and part of the process caused a few pieces of hair to drop out, so we said let's go the whole hog and cut the rest off and look a little odd for a while. So this is the new look. But let's talk about city stuff. A couple of very big things happening right now. It's just the end of October heading into November. We are in the middle of the budget process. We're moving along smoothly. The big thing is a couple of big areas. One, I announced at one of our last city council meetings that in November at one of our subcommittees I will be putting forward a motion to ask City Council to ask for an OPP costing for the police service for the City of Brockville. And this, as I mentioned at the time, will raise a lot of discussion in the city. It already has, because we have a 180-year-old police service, the oldest in Ontario. And there's a lot of tradition to it, and people get very familiar. They feel it's their own, and they're concerned about losing levels of service. And why I am asking City Council to move forward with a costing is to find out if there is an alternative model that gets the same level of service for the City of Brockville at a different price structure. We have been under pressure from our essential services, our fire and our police, for 5, 10 to 15 years now because of the way the city is structured, primarily arbitration and labor rulings. But the bottom line is labor costs have continued to rise much faster than all other costs in essential services. And it's causing us to have to cut areas of service in other areas of the city business. So, for example, in the current operating budget that's being put forward, almost all of the increase in the levy, virtually 65%, is for essential services, police and fire. And why I said almost all, because if you take out some additional projects that are in play, like the aquatorium and the splash pad, then all other departments and outside boards have to actually decrease the amount of money they're getting this year. And city service, city police, city fire is going up. This is because of labor costs and because of legislation that limits our ability to make changes. So I think it's in the best interest of the city to find out if there is an alternative to the current model. And the only available alternative right now is OPP costing, OPP service. The first step is to find out a costing. Basically, they do an estimate of what it would take to provide the exact same level of service and what service options there are. So we are preparing that motion. We'll bring it to council. If council decides to go forward with it, it's a fairly long process. And the OPP would come back with a base model of the exact same service that we get now, plus other options that we could choose to take if we so chose. And it's up in the air as to what the decision of council would be at that time. If it's a huge savings, well, hard to say what would happen. If there's no savings, then we wouldn't change. Other communities that have gone through this process, there are some, like I believe Gananoque and I believe Prescott, that went through it multiple times and chose not to change. And then ultimately Prescott did choose to change. Gananoque is in the process. Perth is changing over to OPP. Port Hope is changing over to OPP. Pembroke is changing over to OPP. And why? Because they had cost savings that were significant enough to change their municipal force. What generally happens in a changeover is that the local officers become OPP officers, and there are a number of administrative and overhead changes. So we don't know all those details. That's what we're asking to find out. We want to know the details. We want to know all the ins and outs of the process. We want to know what the cost would be, or at least I do, and we'll find out if council does as well. So that's the start of the process, and we shouldn't be fear-mongering out there. We shouldn't be saying we're going to lose police officers or we're going to lose service. That's not the case. The city is still committed in all times to a full service that we need in the city of Brockville, and it's just a matter of, is there a different way of getting that service? Now, on a similar line, we contracted out for an external service delivery review. Over the past 3 years, we had an internal service delivery review going on with city staff, and we saved approximately $2.2 million of operating costs in that process. At the end of that process, we said we would then ask the question, do we want to go to an external review, have a second set of eyes looking on the operation? And earlier this year, we chose to do that. We used the Western Management Group to come in and do an external review. Their review was released to the public just this week, and a couple of changes were made here at City Hall to restructure our organization and how we operate. So we did make a few staff changes. The primary, and actually the review did a couple of other things too. It said that we're going to change our focus on economic development, more region-wide focus. We are also going to establish a few criteria internally for establishing priority on projects and direction, and a little bit of role standardization. So those are fairly basic things. Probably one of the bigger things that came out of the external review and that was endorsed by council is the long-term goal of moving our fire service to a composite model. A composite model is where you have professional firefighters alongside part-time firefighters providing the service. Right now we have a full-time professional firefighter service. We are only one of 31 fire services in Ontario that has just a full-time service out of 400 plus fire services. I guarantee you we're not the 31st largest city in Ontario. There are many examples that we've come up with of cities our size or larger that have composite crews, and it works quite successfully. And again, because of the cost drivers on our budget process, which are robbing our ability to put money into other resources or into projects, we have to look at other models. So the council has decided that long term it is our goal to move to a composite crew. This is a challenge because we do have many contractual obligations with our fire crew and our fire service, and we will continue to try and renegotiate those contracts over time to move to the composite force. And again, this is something that people will get very fired up about in the community. We will have probably a very strong lobby effort by the fire services to avoid doing this because, yes, it could mean full-time jobs. So it's clear to see why they would be very concerned. So the challenge will be to deal with I guess what you'd call the rhetoric and try and sift out fact from myth. And we're responsible for that all around. It's our duty as a city to try and make sure that we're getting objective reports, objective information, making sure that the service levels for everybody is important. So clearly those are two big issues. Beyond that, the Waste Treatment Center, $42 million project for the city of Brockville, the biggest project we've ever undertaken, is having its grand opening this Friday. This was funded by the federal government and funded by the provincial government and the city of Brockville. Funded partially in the city of Brockville by former PUC funds and by some borrowing, and that's the general principle that some cash in reserve and some borrowing means that people in the past and people in the future are paying for the upgrade, which is a general principle of municipal government, and it's a big upgrade. It does secondary treatment, and if you've ever seen it, probably before the treatment plant went in, I went down for a tour of the old plant, and the water coming out of the plant, although up to standards that it's supposed to be at, yeah, it had a little discoloration to it. Not the most pleasant thing in the world. Water coming out of the secondary treatment plant, much better. And this is an ongoing process that the province has been doing for some time all along the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes, and the U.S. states are doing the same process of upgrading all waste treatment plants to secondary treatment levels. And there will probably be a time in 10 to 15 years where we will be mandated to move to a tertiary, a third treatment level. And yes, it costs a lot of money. And yes, there are some people that will question it, whether that's needed. But I guarantee you, if you live downstream of that waste treatment plant, you think this is the best idea that ever came across the province. And in the long-term benefit of the St. Lawrence River and the lakes, this is a good thing. For the last 15 years, the water quality has been improving steadily in our water system because of projects like this. Bottom line is we're treating the waste better. And that's got to continue. So, grand opening is this Friday. I think that's just about it. a couple of big issues there, and that's enough meat on the plate. So, Dave Henderson saying so long from City View, BNTV, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.